Welcome to this explainer on Oluyomi Oladevid's incredible research regarding the shifting landscape of global employment. If you want to understand exactly where the future of work is heading, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're unpacking her framework on how we work, why we work, and how the very definition of a job has permanently changed.
Let me ask you something right off the bat. Are you a formal employee or an informal worker? Think about that for a second. For decades, governments and economists just loved this question because it neatly organized the workforce into two tidy little boxes. But today, cleanly fitting into just one of those boxes might be entirely impossible. The lines haven't just blurred, they've basically been erased.
Section 1. The old employment myth, formal versus informal.
Okay, let's dive into this. For like a century, labor economics has been defined by this classic comparison: formal sector employment on one side and informal sector employment on the other. But Oladevid makes a really central observation here. She argues that in our current world, a world just brimming with uncertainties, categorizing the working population into these strict dichotomies is becoming completely unrealistic. She points out that the traditional, rigid boundaries of employment are rapidly collapsing. You literally can no longer just look at a worker and drop them into column A or column B.
Section 2. The pandemic catalyst, COVID-19 job losses. So, what actually caused this old economic dichotomy to shatter? I mean, it didn't just happen overnight on its own. She points directly to the sheer volume and frequency of job losses during the COVID-19 pandemic. When people saw their stable jobs just vanish, it triggered a massive psychological shift, this increasingly speculative behavior among workers. We all remember that sudden explosion of freelance gigs and online side hustles back in 2020, right? The workforce realized that relying on a single stream of formal income was a massive gamble.
Section 3. Defining hybrid employment, a new reality.
And this survival instinct naturally led to a completely new working reality, which she formally terms hybrid employment. This happens when specialized, formal sector workers deliberately diversify their interests into the informal economy, or even other formal sectors. Think of an accountant who keeps their 9-to-5 corporate job but simultaneously runs an informal e-commerce store on the side. They're hedging their bets. She brilliantly illustrates how workers are literally becoming hybrid economic engines to protect themselves.
Section 4. Cascading impacts, governance implications.
Let's move to and see how this builds from individual worker behavior to much wider ripple effects across society. Because her breakdown shows us that this new hybrid reality doesn't just stay with the worker, it impacts governance institutions at every single level. It scales all the way up. It changes how an individual manages their taxes. It completely shifts household dynamics and income stability. It forces firms to rethink how they manage a workforce whose attention is divided. It forces governments to figure out how to regulate and support people operating in both sectors at once. And ultimately, it shifts global economic systems. It's really the whole shebang.
Section 5. The hidden costs of work, time poverty and health.
But, this is where we have to take a serious look at the localized consequences. Because the crucial point here is that this hybrid model absolutely has a dark side. Oladevid identifies what she calls the more pungent threats of hybrid employment: severe time poverty and the deteriorating health of the labor force. When people are working a formal job and simultaneously grinding in the informal sector just to maintain some semblance of security, their free time completely evaporates. This extreme time poverty leads to exhaustion, burnout, and a direct hit to both physical and mental health. So, the workforce might be more economically diversified, but man, they are incredibly stretched.
Section 6. Rethinking work, human development.
And that brings us to her final call to action. Look, we can't go back to the old myth of strictly formal or strictly informal labor, but we also definitely cannot sustain a workforce that is sick and entirely starved of time. So, I'm going to leave you with this really provocative question derived directly from her conclusion. How can we rethink and shape the present nature and the future of work for the sustainability of human development? How do we build systems, policies, and a society around her hybrid employment theory that actually allows human beings to thrive, not just survive? Take some time to ponder that, because that is exactly where the future of work is going to be decided.